Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. As always, we begin with Hakar Satayv to TorahAnytime.com for giving us a platform to teach Torah and spread it throughout the world, and to Kol HaLashon for its global network. We thank Torah Communications Network as well, and YouTube, and our Zoomers, our subscribers, and those that are joining us here at our flagship station, Agudas Yisrael Vayaishev of Fairways Lakewood. We have a very special sponsor tonight, one of my longest subscribers, over 40 years, every week. Michael Fassler, who is sponsoring the shir tonight for a Refuah Shalema for his brother's wife, Yocheved Bas Leah, in the schus of our learning all over the world. She should have a Refuah Shalema B'Ser Shercha L'Yisrael. I have another sponsor tonight. This is kind of very embarrassing, but he texted it to me, and for some reason the text disappeared. I think the name was Klugman. I'm not even sure, so I apologize publicly, and we will do it next week. I don't know what happened. I tried to recover it and I couldn't. If you would like to sponsor a share, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. There's a very, very fundamental lesson to be learned from the behavior of the Shvatim to Yosef. The Torah tells it us. Vayisnu Oisai, they hated him. V'lo yachlu dabroi l'shalom, and they weren't able to speak to him in a peaceful way. So there's a famous Rashi. Rashi shows us a praise of the Shvatim even in the midst of their shame, even in the midst of their disgrace. Rashi is obviously seizing upon the terminology v'lo yachlu. They weren't able. What does that mean, they weren't able? So Rashi says, mitoich genusam, in the midst of their disgrace, that they hated their brother, they couldn't talk to him, lomanu shivcham, we learned their praise, shaloi dibru echad bepeh be'echad belev. They weren't two-faced. They weren't fakers. They weren't phonies. They couldn't dissemble and speak one way different than what was in their heart. It's something that they weren't capable of doing because they were anshe emes. You know, a lot of people could put on a show. They couldn't put on a show. They were such people of integrity that they couldn't feel one way and say something else. It couldn't do it. But you shouldn't get an idea that what they did was good. Rashi clearly says, mitoich genuzam, in the midst of their disgrace. Just Rashi was mining out for us an incidental lesson that a Jew, I think I once told you this, I know I did, told to you many times, that in Megillas Rus, which was written by one of the greatest people in the history of mankind, Megillas Rus was written by Shmuel HaNavi. He calls Rus, after she was converted, he calls her Rus HaMoaviyah, Rus the Moabite. Now that's very strange. The Rambam says categorically that you don't refer to a person's past when they convert. You don't say, his name is now Mordechai, you don't say, oh, Tony used to be a guy. Tony the guy. So saying about Rus that she's Rus HaMoyaviyah is very strange. So in Rus Rabbah it asks the question, why does he refer to her as Rus the Moabite? So the Medrash says that Boaz had an interaction with Rus in his field, and Naomi, when Rus came home, asked her what happened. And Rus related the details accurately, but in the wrong chronological order. So Shmuel over here chided her. Some of the Moabite is still clinging to you, because a Jew from birth would be so attached to the truth that they wouldn't be able to switch around the order. That was the old-time Jew. The old-time Jew couldn't tell a lie. There are 4 categories of people that will not be allowed into the Shechina in the next world. And one is Kata Shekronim, the group of liars. Doiver Shkarim lo yiken neged einai. So truth is a very, very important thing. But what we're going to now zoom in on is the essential lesson. And that is, they hated him and they weren't able to speak with him peacefully. So one of the great Rishonim, the Ralbag, there's a Ralbag on Chumash. It's not very available, but the Ralbag on Chumash says a Yesoid Gadol, tremendously fundamental lesson, and I'm going to read it to you in his exact, well-phrased words. Lamadnu mizeh, we learn from this, ki kfar tusar hasina, hate and enmity already dissipates. Kisha oimer oimed ha'adam ledaber imre'ehu, when the 2 people start to talk. Hate simmers and festers when people don't talk to one another. And they let it fester and swell in their hearts. Says the Ralbag, once people talk to each other, it usually gets better. But they have to take that step. It takes a man. They have to take the step to talk to each other. This is a Beferish Rambam. The Rambam writes in Hilchas Deis. Hilchas Deis is the laws of attitudes. So the Rambam writes in the 6th parak of Hilchas Deis, Halacha Vav, Kisheyechte ish leish, when one person does a wrong to another person. One person hurts another person. One person insults another person, cheats another person, slanders another person. Lo yistemenu v'yishtak. The victim shouldn't hate him and be quiet. This is the behavior of the wicked. It says, "V'lo diber Avshalom es Amnon mu'umla." Avshalom didn't say anything to Amnon. Limera v'atay, from bad to good. Kisana Avshalom es Amnon, because Avshalom hated Amnon. And because they didn't speak with one another, they didn't mend any fences until tragedy occurred. It's very interesting. It's a little bit Pelagic that if you look in the Rabbeinu Bachya, this is not the scope of our shir now, but if you look in the Rabbeinu Bachya quotes that pasuk as a praise to Avshalom, different than the Rambam. But the Pashtus is like the Rambam. What should a person's behavior be? Ella, and this is not easy. It's not easy to do the right thing. Ella mitzvah alav loidiyai. It's a mitzvah for the one who was hurt, the one who was slighted, to inform him, v'loy maloi, and to tell his assailant, lama asisi likach. Why did you do this to me? V'lama chatasi bidvar ploini. And why did you sin against me in this matter? Shenemar hoichiach toichiach es amisecha. You should rebuke your friend, v'loy sisu alav chay, and not bear a sin. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, because when somebody does something bad to us, we're angry. We don't want to look at the person. We don't want to hear any excuses. We don't want to get involved with their hatred. But notice it says, you should face and rebuke your friend and not bear a sin. Now, the words of course have many angles. First of all, it means that if you see somebody do something wrong, you should rebuke him, because otherwise you'll bear a sin, because it says that if you're able to, if you're able to rebuke, and you don't rebuke, nitfas ba'isavin, you're also held accountable. Right? See somebody talking in shul, you should tell him, quietly, not to embarrass him, but tell him, it's a big sin to talk during Kaddish, to talk during Shemoneh Esrei. And if you don't do that, you're also considered accountable. Right? So, v'lo yisisu alav chet means rebuke so that you shouldn't share in the sin. It also means that rebuke in a way that you don't bear a sin. In other words, don't embarrass someone publicly. Don't do it because you're angry. Don't do it because you have a personal agenda. Only do it because you care about the other person. If you do it wrong, you shouldn't bear a sin by giving the wrong kind of teichacha. The Ksab Sefer says that teichacha is the hardest mitzvah of the 613 mitzvahs. But I think that the pasuk means something else. It's so interesting how this pasuk is viewed from different vantage points. Normally, when we hear the pasuk of Eichiach Teichiach, we learn it for the benefit of the criminal, the benefit of the wrongdoer. Rebuke him for his benefit. But the Rambam is saying, no, rebuke the person for your benefit. There's a sin lurking over here. Let's say somebody said something very not nice about me. He said, let's say somebody said, Rabbi Weiss, he's a very arrogant fellow. So I could feel in my heart hatred towards him, especially if he said it in a public forum. And then there's an aveira on my part. It says, You're not supposed to hate your brother in your heart. So therefore the Rambam says, remember what the Ralbag said. Once you talk about it, you could get clarity. You could get clarity. So therefore, you should not have a sin of hating your friend in your heart. Get it out in the open. And I believe, to my own thought, but this could be why it says Hoichiach Toichiach, a double lashon. Now the Pashtus it says Hoichiach Toichiach to tell you that you have a mitzvah Toichacha even many times. If it doesn't work, you should do it again and again. That's why it repeats it. But it could be also because it's for both people. There's an Indian of Teichacha for the benefit of the one that did wrong, to help to improve him, to help reform him. But this Teichiach is also an Indian of rebuke for yourself, that you speak it out, and you don't let it fester in your heart, and you come to a resolution. The great Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz says this same idea in his brilliant Sefer Tiferes Yonasan, doesn't need my haskama. He says, and I quote, that kishiyesh la'adam b'libay tluna v'tarumais al chaverai, when a person has in his heart complaints and tightness on his friend, the sinner grows miyayim l'yayim. The anger will fester and the hate will fester from day to day. But when he speaks it out and he says, and he approaches his friend and he said, look what you did to me. You insulted me in front of people. Look what you did to me. You cost me a job. You cost me a shidduch. So that gives a chance either v'chaveira yitznatzel lefanav, his friend will either defend himself and say, you know, I didn't cost you the job. I just told him that the other person asked first. You didn't hear that part of the story. I wasn't saying that you aren't good. I wasn't telling him not to use you. He might diffuse the whole thing. Or he'll admit or he'll admit and say, you know, I'm pretty ashamed of what I did, because you gave an opportunity to get it out in the open. And he'll say, and I won't lasais oid kazeh. And then kova asina, then the anger dissipates. And that's why the Torah says, now, as I said, this is not an easy thing to do. It takes a man. It's not an easy thing to do. If somebody does something that nice to you, if somebody says, you know, yeah, I really don't have any. I don't have anything to do with Rabbi Weiss's shul. I don't. So you don't feel like going over to the person and talking. You feel like staying away from the person. But the Torah is telling us, although that's the natural, doing right means the Torah teaches us not to do what's natural. The Torah, this is the meaning when it says to be mitalmidov shel Aaron, oyev shalom v'roidev shalom. A person bakei shalom v'roid feyu. you have to go against the grain and say, why did you say that about my shul? Even though you don't feel like talking to the person. And there's an incentive to do it, even though you don't want to do it. What's the incentive? The famous Rashi in Shmos, in Chumash Shmos, says over there that there's a law on the Mizbeach, on the altar, that lo yisonef aleim barzel. You can't cut it with metal. That's why they had the miraculous shamer that cut through rock. So Rashi says, why can't you cut the Mizbeach with metal? Because the Mizbeach is a peacemaker. When we bring a carbon, it makes peace between us and our Father in heaven. And then Rashi makes a famous Kal V'chomer. Mad of the Mizbeach, which is a diamond, which is an inanimate object. But since it is a peacemaker, it's protected from any metal. Therefore, if we are animate objects, if we make peace between people, here we're talking about making peace. Somebody said not nice things to me, and instead of avoiding him, I try to go and make peace. Or make a peace between husband and your own wife. Then for sure we'll be protected from metal. That's a surgical scalpel. A root canal is drilled. So it's a very big incentive to pursue peace. I'll give you another incentive. In Masechtas Kala, in the third parak, it tells us a gematria. Not many people learn Masechtas Kala. But in the third parak of Masechtas Kala, it says that Shalom is B'gematria 376, and Shaveya, to cry out, is 376. And it says if somebody pursues peace, Ein tfilosoi chayzeres reikam. His cry out will not be turned back empty-handed. So this is a big lesson. The Ralbag says if Yosef's brothers were able to talk with Yosef, they were worried that Yosef was like he wanted to take everything. Like Yitzhak took everything away from Yishmael and Keturah's children. And Yaakov took everything away from Esav. They were afraid that Yosef wanted to take everything. They would have a talk with him. They would have seen that that's not the case. It would have diffused the whole thing. But a person, it's not an easy thing. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, as Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz says, what was the result of lo yachlu daber l'shalom? Because they didn't talk about it, it got worse. They hated him more. If you don't talk, it festers and it becomes a much bigger feud. A person might say, well, if you don't talk about it, it's going to dim. No, it gets worse. It doesn't dim. The Gemara tells us in Masechtas Sanhedrin, Poiter Mayim Reishis Medain, which means that when the water comes out of a dam, like a water that escapes from a dam, so is the beginning of a quarrel. At the beginning, it's only a small little hole. But we know that the burst in the dam doesn't stay. It widens and widens and widens until it's an explosion. That's the way it works. So here's the rule. If somebody does something to you, if you're able to look away and forget about it, That's the best thing. If it's a small thing that you can say, it's just stupid. If you don't have to make something out of it, that's good. But if it's something that's going to bother you, then it's going to grow worse, not better. Then the right thing to do, says the Ralbag, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz, says the Rambam, is to approach the person and talk about it. It's not easy, but instead of Leisisna es achicha bilvavecha, fulfill oichiach teichiach es amisecha, and talk about it. Maybe you're wrong. Talk about it. There's a story. I once mentioned this story. It's such a powerful story. The benefit of dealing correctly with a dispute. In Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Eliezer Roth tells this story. It's a true and amazing story. There was a Talmid Chacham that lived in a small apartment complex on the 4th floor, and there was a communal courtyard. Someone on the 1st floor, also from a Yidden, they had a small little shop where they sold playpens and cribs and car seats and high chairs. And he used a little portion of the courtyard to advertise his quality stuff. The Talmid Chacham, who learned a lot in the house, felt that the noise disturbed him, and he felt since it was a residential house, it wasn't right. So he protested. He said, this is not 13th Avenue, it's a private area. The other people disagreed. It was their panasa. They couldn't afford to, rent a place. So the Talmid Chacham did what was proper. He didn't just let it fester in his heart. He said, let's go to a reputable Bezdin in Bnei Brak. So like from a Yidden, they went to a reputable Bezdin in Bnei Brak. The Bezdin investigated. They even came down to the house to look at it. And they ruled against the Talmid Chacham, and they said he had the right to leave out his wares. So right there in the Bezdin, the Talmid Chacham said, well, if that's the case, I see that I was wrong, and I wish you well. The Av Bezdin was very impressed with the adinus, with the refinement of the Talmid Chacham, that he accepted the psak. He told the Talmid Chacham, who knows, one day you might benefit from them being there. Interesting comment, okay. Av Bezdin was a big Talmid Chacham. A week and a half later, their 2-year-old on the 4th floor was playing on the porch and climbed onto the railing of the porch and lost his footing and fell 4 flights down. When they saw it, they thought the worst. A little baby, 4 flights, it's a death sentence. What happened? He fell right into a crib that was under the window advertising the wares. And his fall was completely cushioned. He didn't break one bone, and he was completely okay. Zilberstein, I believe it's in the Alein L'Shabeach. Reb Zilberstein brings down this story and says, you see what happens in the schus of doing things right. Vayove Yosef es dibosam roya laviem. Yosef brought the tidings of evil to their father. You know that he said that the Shvatim ate Eva min achai, a limb from a live animal. He spoke denigratingly about the children of Bilhah and Zilpah. They were with the wrong kind of women. The Yisrael ahaves Yosef, and Yisrael loved Yosef. Now, when you read the pasuk, it seems to lend credibility that Yaakov accepted Yosef's report, because it just says Yisrael loved Yosef. It doesn't say that Yaakov rebuked him and told him, "You're speaking lashon hara." Now, there is a Sifsei Chachamim. There is a Girsa in the Sifsei Chachamim. I know because it's brought down in different places. It's not in our Sifsei Chachamim. In our Sifsei Chachamim, in our Mikrais Gedolos, it's not there. But there is a Sifsei Chachamim, and I quote, V'im toimer lama loy matzu sheYaakov hoichicham al dvarim elu. Why don't we find that Yaakov rebuked the brothers? Why are you eating Eva min achai? Yesh loymar ki lo kibel Yaakov divrei Yosef. So there is such a Sifsei Chacham. It's not in our, that Yaakov didn't accept. So then why didn't Yaakov rebuke him? So again, they quote the Sifsei Chacham. It's not in our Sifsei Chachamim. That he did rebuke him. It's just not mentioned in the pasuk. Now, the Guraye, that's the Maral, also says that Yaakov didn't accept the lashon hara. And it's known that the Chavetz Chaim says this as well. The Chavetz Chaim writes in Hilchos Lashon Hara Klal Vav Yud, sheYaakov lo kibel lashon hara. Now, in the past, I've mentioned over here, because it's unusual because it's not a popular sefer, but I happen to have the rear medrash called Medrash Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And in the printing of the Medrash Rabbeinu HaKadosh, it says that Rabbeinu HaKadosh asks, which is worse, to speak lashon hara or to listen to lashon hara? Now we would think it's to speak lashon hara. First of all, you're doing an action. Second of all, you're starting the trouble. But he says that it's worse to listen to lashon hara, because Yosef, who spoke lashon hara, was away from his family for 22 years. But Yaakov, who listened to lashon hara, was bereft of the Shechina for 22 years. So from this Medrash Rabbeinu HaKadosh, it's mashma that Yaakov did accept the lashon hara. So a listener, one year, when I said this in a shir, sent me a letter, and it's true. There's a footnote in the Chavetz Chaim, who says that this Medrash Rabbeinu HaKadosh is not, it's a mistake. Rabbeinu HaKadosh could have never said this. It's a mistake. There are mistakes. Because Yaakov's demus was on the Kisei HaKavod, and somebody whose image is on the Kisei HaKavod can never be guilty of accepting Lashon Hara. Chavetz Chaim says we never find that Yaakov was faulted for speaking Lashon Hara. But just as an aside, I will tell you that the Chavetz Chaim and the Rambam both say that listening to Lashon Hara is worse than speaking to Lashon Hara. It's a beferish Rambam in Hilchos Deis, Perek Vav Halacha Gimel, Hamekabel Lashon Hara Grua Memisha Medabrai. And Taka, it says, Kol Hamekabel Lashon Hara, whoever accepts Lashon Hara, Roi Lashlicha LeKalavin, is fit to be thrown to the dogs. It doesn't say who speaks Lashon Hara. It says who accepts Lashon Hara is fit to be thrown to the dogs. Now, so it's clear from the Maral, from the Sibsei Chachamim, from the Chavetz Chaim, that Yaakov was not guilty of speaking Lashon Hara. Some say that he didn't accept it, but he did plan on investigating it. That he's allowed to do. And that's why he didn't rebuke him on the spot. Now there's a famous Afikei Yam. The Afikei Yam asks 3 questions. It says, Vayaishev Yosef as Dibasam Royal Aviyam. Yosef brought evil tidings to their father. So first of all, he asks, why does it say Vayove, he brought? It should say Vayisaper, that he told his father. In Vayove, you don't bring words, you speak words. So it should say Vayisaper Yosef es Dibasam Royal Aviyam. That's the first question he asks. The Sibsei Chacham says it doesn't say Vayoytze Yosef es Dibasam Royal Aviyam, because Vayoytze is when it's not true. And that's what it says by the Meraglim, that they were Moitzi Diba Roa El Haaretz. That's when it's not true. Yosef thought he was saying the truth. So that's why it doesn't say Vayoytze, but why doesn't it say Vayisaper? Secondly, why does it say he brought it El Aviyam to their father? It wasn't his father? It should say that he brought the words to his father. Yaakov was also his father. It should say Vayav Yosef is Dibasam Royal Aviv. Why does it say El Aviyam? Very strong question. Third question is, why does the pasuk say V'hu Nar? And he was a youth. What was the purpose of saying that? So Afikei Yam says, in order to say a bad report for Te'elis, for benefit, which was what Yosef was doing, so that his father could help the brothers, there has to be 3 conditions. Number 1, it has to be that you didn't try to rebuke them yourself. What are you telling somebody else? Try yourself. So the Afikei Yam says that's why it says V'hu Nar. He was young. He was the kid. And they wouldn't take him serious. So he didn't have that option. The second condition is that you can't exaggerate. You have to say exactly what happened. So that's why it says Vayove, he brought it. He brought it the way it was. It's like he carried it the way it was. No exaggeration. And the third thing is you can't have any personal agenda. There can't be any personal agenda. So that's why it doesn't say El Aviv, that he told his father. If it says his father, maybe it said his father should love him more. It says El Aviyam, he told their father. It was for their benefit. Beautiful. What a beautiful Afikei Yam. The fact of the matter, though, is, after all this is said and done, we know that Yosef telling this to his father unleashed a snowball effect that reverberated with hundreds of thousands of people and throughout the ages, right? Yosef said this, and because of the evil tidings, we went down to Mitzrayim. We were afflicted by Paro, who has the perah, the foul mouth. We know because of this, the Asara Haruge Malchus had to die. The 10 children of Rabbi Yochanan had to die. And it was obviously there was some fault. Chavetz Chaim says the fault is that Yosef should have tried to rebuke himself first. And this is a lesson. Before you talk to somebody else, first see if you could do something about it without having to share with someone else. The Sifsei Chachamim, however, says something else. I don't think many people say it, but the Sifsei Chachamim says that Yosef didn't investigate enough the details. Like, for example, we know that they weren't eating Avim and Achai, a limb from a live animal, because they created the animal with the Sefer Yetzirah, with the book of creation. So there's no Isser of Avim and Achai. Same thing it says that they were with other women. These weren't real women. They were women that were created with the Sefer Yetzirah. But Yosef didn't investigate that. And here, this is a really, really practical lesson in Lashon Hara. Comes to a shidduch. Before you say something negative, make sure you investigate. People say, yeah, I noticed that this girl, she's not living at home. There must be something wrong. Now the truth is she wasn't living at home because she has a bubby that has Alzheimer's, and she was helping her bubby. You gotta check before you give information. Gotta check. Yeah, I noticed that this boy, he was talking during shul. Truth of the matter is this person didn't know that he was on Hatzalah. He was answering Hatzalah call. You gotta check before. Check. So that's a Sifsei Chacham. Yosef didn't check enough. Very powerful Sifsei Chacham. I want to talk a minute to you about this business, about the Sefer HaYetzirah. It says that they saw Yosef eat Avim and Achai. Really, it wasn't a limb from a live animal. They created the animal through the Sefer HaYetzirah. In my Sefer Power Benching, which by the way is now available again, it's a great gift for Hanukkah. If you want to order hardcover copy, 718-916-3100. Just checking if maybe that sponsor texted me. That's such a strange thing. My Sefer Power Benching, I wrote that which it says in the first bracha of benching, a meichin mozain, that Hashem prepares fruit l'chol briyosav asher bara, for all the creations that He created. Now that sounds to be superfluous. Of course He created. You create everything. You should just say l'chol briyosav to all His creations. L'chol briyosav asher bara, what there are creations that He didn't create? Teretz says there are. Because you can make something with the Sefer HaYetzirah. And Hashem doesn't prepare food for those things that are created from the Sefer HaYetzirah. It's only the Chol Briyosav Asher Bara. So here I want to say something. You know, the brothers, by causing Yosef to suspect them, they also are responsible for unleashing the full fury of Yeridas Mitzrayim, of Asar Harugei Malchus. The Ben Ish Chai says that you're not allowed to learn the Sefer Yetzirah until you're 20. Yosef HaTzadik at that time was 17. They didn't want him to be jealous of it, so he didn't know about the Sefer Yetzirah. And because he suspected them, if he would have known, oh, it's not a limb from a live animal, there wouldn't have been a problem. So I want to suggest that there's no benefit of making things with the Sefer Yetzirah. Why the Sefer Yetzirah is there, that's another question. But to make food from the Sefer Yetzirah, we don't need to add to what the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us. We say a bracha every morning, She'asali kol tzarki, Hashem gives us everything we need. Poiseach es yodecho mazbia l'chol chai ratzon, gives us all our needs. We don't need to, by using the Sefer Yetzirah, they opened up a terrible can of worms. It could be that this was not the right thing to do. It was not the right thing to do to have the Sefer Yetzirah, to make things with the Sefer Yetzirah. Now I want to tell you something. I want to tell you something that the Chavetz Chaim writes in the Shmiras HaLashon. In the Shmiras HaLashon, the Chavetz Chaim writes that it says that Yosef was, it's a medrash. The medrash says that Yosef was in the Beis HaAsurim in jail for 10 years. And then he was there another 2 years because he made a hishtadlis, that's another subject, he made a hishtadlis that he shouldn't have made. He told the Saramashkim that you should remind me to Paro. When you're there, remind me to Paro that I interpreted your dream. Because he did that, he stayed an extra 2 years. But otherwise, he would stay in the dungeon. It was a dungeon for 10 years. Says the Medrash, why 10 years? 1 year for each shevet that he said Lashon Hara about. Says the Chavetz Chaim, we know the Chavetz Chaim dedicated his life to warning us about the ruin of Lashon Hara. That for each of the brothers that he spoke Lashon Hara, he was condemned to be in a dungeon for 12 months. Kemishpat Risham Shebegehenim. We know that we say Kaddish only 11 months, because 12 months is only for the Risham. Risham get 12. So he was condemned to be in jail a year for each one of the brothers that he spoke Lashon Hara about, because for speaking one statement of Lashon Hara, deserve a year in jail, like Mishpat Risham B'Gehenim, which is 12 months. That's how terrible. You know, I always told you, we teach our children, Lashon Hara Lamed Hey, go to Gehenim the easy way. It says in Yerushalmi Peah that the 3 worst sins are Avodah Zarah, Gila Arayah, Shvichas Damim, V'Lashon Hara Keneged Kulam. It's just not a Jewish thing to talk about other people. but don't talk about other people. Famous story of the Chavetz Chaim. It's a renowned story that the Chavetz Chaim used to go to places incognito. And he came to a town, it was before Shabbos, and he came to the hotel. He had a box with some of his svarim that he was selling, and he asked for a room. So the innkeeper looked him up and down, saw that he was a poor man, he didn't have a money bag. So he said, well, I have a bed in the dormitory for a few kopecks. So the Chavetz Chaim said, perfect. He went to the bed. He started singing Shir Hashirim and getting ready for Shabbos. And he davened with them in the hotel. In the morning, word got out that the Chavetz Chaim was in the town, and the entire city came to the hotel to be Mekabel Pan the Gadol Adar. And they came, and the hotel owner said, what's going on? What's happening? He said, you lucky fellow, you're host to the Gadol Adar. He goes in, and he sees that it's the Chavetz Chaim. And he falls on the floor, and he says, please forgive me. If I would have known, I would have given you the presidential suite. I would have rolled out the red carpet of welcome. Chavetz Chaim laughed and said, I had a very pleasant night with the farmers. All they talked about were their cows and sheep. Tremendous lesson in that. I remember saying once to a group of women that I liked when they play Mahjong and Scrabble. Mahjong, they're busy cracking and bamming. You can't talk. You have to follow. You have to be able to match what's on the card. You can't miss a tile. Playing Scrabble, you want to know where to put the X, the Y, the Z. You're calculating the tiles. You're figuring out things. You're not talking about people. Talking about people is a ruination of the human spirit. We see the dreadful, the cataclysmic consequences of that one report that Yosef spoke. He missed all 10 of Binyamin's chasanas, together with all of his brothers' weddings. He was in a dungeon for 10 years. V'asulai Sainas Pasim. And Yaakov made for him the Crayola cloak, the colorful cloak. And we know Vayikanu by Echav. And his brothers were jealous of him. The great Maggid, Rav Shvadron, said a very important and practical lesson, which I can testify as a Rav for over 40 years. I can testify how true this is. Rav Shvadron says that sometimes people are consumed by jealousy over someone else, when really if they would know that person, their life is nothing to be jealous about. And he says that what were they jealous? They were jealous about the colorful cloak, Pasim. The Balaturim says Pasim is an otrikin for Yosef's, it's an acronym for Yosef's woes. Pasim stands for Potifar, Soicharim, Yishmaelim, and Midyanim. He was sold, he was taken first by Soicharim, by businessmen, then given to Yishmaelim, then given to Midyanim, and then given to Potifar, and then he had the problems with the wife of Potifar, and he was put into the dungeon. That's what they were jealous of. They're jealous of was really a life of tremendous tsaras. I'll give you some examples. I had a person that was very wealthy, drove a fancy car, he had a fancy house, he went on fancy trips, and everybody was very jealous of him. He had it all. What they didn't know is that this man had a vein in his brain that was a ticking time bomb. It was inoperable, and the doctors told him that at any time it could burst. Who would want to live such a life? Is that somebody to be jealous of? I'll tell you another story. There was a couple that I knew. He was very handsome. She was very pretty. And many, many people were jealous of them. They were like the old-time American success story. You see, what I knew is that they fought so much that all the years they slept in separate bedrooms. But everybody was jealous. They're the all-American couple. This is what Rav Shradran is telling us. Rav Shradran says, don't waste the time about being jealous to other people. First of all, Hashem gives us what we need. Sha'asali kol tzarki. Don't be jealous. We'd have something else that wouldn't be good for us. Hashem gives us what we need. But don't think you know what's going on by another person. Trust me. As a Rav, I can tell you, you don't know what's going on by another person. I once had a subscriber. At that time, my subscription for tapes, I went up, I remember after many, many years, I went up many, many years. I went up from $18 a month for 4 tapes to $20 a month. It was a big raise because the postage kept on going up and up and up and up. So I raised it from $18 a month to $20 a month. And there was one person, what I would do is I would send every 4th week a stamped return envelope, and people would send a check. And if they didn't send it, then the next week I'd send another stamped return envelope with a question mark. And the next week I'd send another stamped return envelope. Anyway, there's this one person who I happened to meet in Brooklyn, and he was driving a Jaguar, but not a regular Jaguar. A Jaguar Limited, a Besser Jaguar. And I met him, and he hadn't paid me for months and months and months and months. So I just mentioned to him, just quietly, when you get a chance, if you could remember to send me a check. He said, Rabbi Weiss, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I don't have the money. And I look at him, and I look at the car. And he said to me, you want to know about the Jaguar. See, in my line, if I don't appear to be doing well, I'm finished. Only thing I have is that people think I still have money. If I don't drive this car, then I'm finished. But Rabbi Weiss, I'm telling you, you're my Rebbe, I have nothing. People are jealous. They don't know what they're jealous of. There's a community in Lawrence that is like the creme de la creme. It's called Back Lawrence. There's Lawrence, and then there's Back Lawrence. It's a very, very elite community. I know from Tomchei Shabbos that they deliver packages to the backyard of people in Back Lawrence. These people had money once. Now they're saddled with back-breaking mortgages that they can't pay, and they're penniless. And people look at their mansions, and they're jealous of them. While these people are living in shame, in terror, and in abject poverty. Don't be jealous of other people. You don't know what's going on by them. Pasim, Potifar, Seicherim, Yishmaelim Midyanim. I want to thank again Michael Fassler, who's dedicating the shir L'Refuah Shalema for his brother's wife, Yocheved Basleya. She should have a L'Refuah Shalema B'Seg Shachar Yisrael. If you want to sponsor a shir, 718-916-3100. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful Shabbos.